Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jill McDaniel, and I am the cemetery administrator for the 13 cemeteries in Concord. A lot of people don't know that we have 13 cemeteries, but we certainly do, and all but 2 of them are still active, that we still conduct burials in. The Blossom Hill Cemetery, the large cemetery that's by the prison, has 3 actual cemeteries in there. There's Blossom Hill, there's Concord Calvary, and there's Beth Jacob, the Jewish cemetery. We have 2 cemeteries in Pennacook, Woodlawn and Concord Calvary. We have 2 in East Concord, which is Pine Grove and Old Fort. Our number 1 cemetery, the very first one, is Old North, that we'll be looking at tonight. We have Horse Hill over on River Hill, by River Hill Market, over on Horse Hill. We have a very small family cemetery, which is Stickney Hill, that is on Stickney Hill Road, heading towards Bow. And we also have Sowcook Cemetery, which is off of 106, and we have Millville Cemetery, that's what past the hospital. So I have a list of all of our cemeteries, an approximate amount of burials that we have in each cemetery, and the date that they were established. So you certainly can help yourself to those later. As I said, we take care of all of the cemeteries. We do the mowing, the trimming, the burials, trimming of shrubs. We do loaming and seeding. Anything that has to do with the cemetery, we do. We have 6 full-time employees, not including myself. So it's a lot for 13 cemeteries. For us to just do the mowing and trimming alone, it takes us 2 weeks to start and end and come to the beginning again. So always, we're ready to start again, and it's already, the grass is already too long. Our big time of year, our Christmas, is Memorial Day. We have over 3,500 veterans that are buried in our cemeteries, and I work hand in hand with the veterans associations that put out the flags for all of the veterans. We also have a beautiful little chapel. The Sarah B. Perkins Chapel was dedicated in honor of Sarah B. by her daughter. So we have a lot of services in there. We have burials. We've had 4 weddings in the last 10 years. Which people go, to get married in the cemetery, but if you haven't been in our chapel, it is the nicest little quaint chapel you have ever seen. And I can't imagine a nicer place for a small little wedding. We do approximately 235 burials per year. We bury all winter long. So our winter burials take a lot longer than our summer burials. We have to plow to the area, hand shovel to the grave. We have to hand shovel the snow and ice off the grave. We use a jackhammer to jackhammer through the frost, and then we start our burial process. So people think, they don't really give the thought of what goes on to cemeteries, but it really is a year-long event that we have. We do everything that you can imagine there. We also, as far as promoting the chapel, I wanted to let everyone know, excuse me, allergies. We have a service in the chapel the second Friday of every month. It's going on 3 years that we've done this. Unfortunately, we don't have a promotion staff that can work at getting the word out for this, so it's really word of mouth. So I'm going to leave our little flyers here, but I want you to know that we have these services to offer to the people in Concord and surrounding towns a place to come to be spiritually nurtured. It's not religious, so to speak, but if anybody's looking for anything in particular in the services, we're there to offer it to anyone in what they may be looking for. So we have between 12 and 40 people at our services. It ranges by time of year. We have our services year-round. We heat with wood in our little quaint chapel, so we have a large wood stove in the basement with blowers that blow up into the area. A lot of our services are candlelight, and we have the beautiful windows that the light comes through in the evening when we have our services. So it's just really a nice place for people to gather. A couple of things I also wanted to go over with you. We have a common ground section. The common ground section one of the Common Ground sections is in Blossom Hill Cemetery. We have 686 people buried in a very small area. These were people from the late 1800s until probably 1940. These people were poor, didn't have families, or were just passing through and weren't established. So, you know, they didn't want to buy a family lot, so they were in the Common Ground. This was for a lack of another word, a forgotten section. There were not a lot of stones in this section. There were, let me just check my notes here, 208 adults in this section, but there are 476 infants. So in this time, there were a lot of infants. They were buried one right after another. And back in the 1800s, there wasn't a vault, so a lot of these little babies were wrapped in a blanket or maybe in a wooden box. So they were really packed in there pretty tightly. Some of the rows have upward of 150 burials in one row of children, of infants. So what happened was, in 1901, the cemetery staff got together and they said, you know what, we've got to mark these. So in 1901, whoever was in the office, I found the records that said, we're going to mark the poor folks, in their words, mark their graves. So the first row was marked. There were white marble markers issued by the city or however they came up with their funds at that time. And the first row of 38 adults were all marked with this small little white marble marker. Well, that marker, over the years, went down and was underground. So when I started 10 years ago, I sent my crew out and I said, put up the grade stakes around the corner so that when we plow, we would be able to avoid the different blocks. And they came down onto one, clink. They're like, what is this? So they dug down and there's a marker. Now that was just fascinating. And they went over a foot, clink, clink, clink. So 38 markers were raised 10 years ago in the spring of that following year. And we put foundations under them so that they're not going to fall down again. They're going to stay up. So we, and just before 2011, I had my staff and myself, and we went out and we probed the entire area. And what we found was metal pins that had numbers on them. Not every single person of the 686 people had these pins, but a lot of them did. So we were able to, with this probing technology and pulling up any markers, we were able to find the burial location, which had never really been recorded, for everyone out there. So I have a name and a location to the inch of where all of these people are. And in 2011, in May, we had a wonderful dedication to these folks, and that we're going to always remember them. We haven't forgotten them, and that was just wonderful. Wasn't enough. A couple of years later, I said, you know, I still was uneasy about it, and I said, we've got to do more. So I came up with an Adopt a Grave program for the Common Ground section. For $100, a person can come in and look at our list. Our list is alphabetical as well as by the year. So if you're looking in the month. So what I did was I looked through and I looked for someone who had a birth and a death date, because I was looking for an infant, of November 1st, which is my birthday. So I found little baby Charles Canine, and I adopted him. So him and I have the same birthday. He was born and he died on the same day. So for that $100, a marker is crafted by Star Granite Company, and a certificate of gratitude is issued to anyone who adopts a grave. The marker itself, the marker itself has several different things. We have a lot of unknowns who we would just have a date, but we also, if we do have the information, this is what my little Adopt a Grave baby marker looks like. It's 6 inches by 12 inches, and we put it right out there to the inch where it belongs. Excuse me. We have adopted out almost 80, which is wonderful, but we have 686 people out there that are not marked. So with this, I would like to offer anyone who would like to take one of these brochures. If you're not at a time where you're able to do anything like this, then please pass it on to someone that you may know. I've had 4 ladies come in, and they all went $25 each, and they adopted a marker for a little person in a grave. We also have unknown adults. Unfortunately, the only information on some of them that we have is man found in the river. They don't know his exact date of death. They don't know the circumstances. They don't know his name, of course. So we have some unknowns, and we've had some very creative ideas from people that have adopted. Some of them are, God gave this infant a name because it was an infant that was found deceased, became an angel and has a certain date. So the Adopt a Grave program is just a wonderful program, and like I said, it's alphabetical as well, so if you're a Johnson and you want to see if there's any Johnsons, if you go back far enough, we're all related, but it may be a Johnson that you're looking for, or any name at all, and I can look them up for you at any time, or you can look through the books. So that's our Adopt a Grave program. Also, I am asked to do a lot of genealogy, and I recognize some people in the audience here that I have we're on first name basis that do a lot of genealogy. When I first started with this job, I was told we don't do genealogy, and if they come in, da da da, and I thought, well, genealogy, this is the last step. This is the last thing they're looking for, is where their loved one rests. So that changed very quickly. So a couple of things on genealogy. I will get a call, or I will get a email, and people will ask, do you have, and I'm going to say, for instance, Mabel Perry. So I'll say, sure, let me look. So yeah, I see Mabel Perry, and this is the lot card. So Mabel Perry is buried here. She died February 22nd, 1874. Also on this lot is George, Mary, Isabel, Frank Perry, and then there's James, Fred, and Sarah Price. So for some reason, the Perrys and the Prices are all related. So this is what a typical lot card looks like. These are the people that are buried there. They all have a corresponding number, and it tells what grave they're in. Then there is a lot card for each person. Now this has really become pretty valuable to a lot of people, because this one will say, wife of George, son of James, son of Herman, and Mrs. Price. So there's, or the children of, and there may be 3 or 4 children listed on here. So this is a lot of information that, for genealogy purposes, that people can get. Then I'll send them a map of the block that this family lot is in. And this is a map of our cemetery, and this is why I send a map, because this is the size of Blossom Hill, Concord, Calvary, and Beth Jacob Cemetery. So as you can see, it's quite large. This particular section is section J, which is right here. So for me to send them out to block 29J, they're going to look at me like I have 2 heads. So I give them this, and all of this information, and it's just wonderful. This brings me to another subject of genealogy. When I first was working here 10 years ago, I had people come in, and elderly folks, and they said, I remember back when I was a little girl, I would come in with my mother, and we would go over by the wall, over by the prison, and there's a field over there, and we would pray at my little brother's infant's grave. And so I'd say, oh, well, we have the record. I'm new. We've got all these records. Of course we have it. So I would look in the file. No, we don't have that little baby. And then a week I always write everything down. I'm pretty good about that. So I'd write down in case I come across anything. A couple weeks later, another person would come in, same story. Got to be about 12 or 14 people with the same exact story over by the wall. And I said, something's going on here. So I contacted the church, because that's Concord Calvary. The city of Concord owns the cemetery now, but at the time, before 1980, the church ran the cemetery. So church is a church, they're not a record-keeping business office, so I understand the difficulty of keeping records, but it appeared that a lot of the babies, the infants, weren't recorded. So I found out that Waters Funeral Home does 99% of Catholic burials. So I called them up, And I'm new, I don't know much. And I said, I work for the cemetery, and this is what I'm looking for. And they said, oh, we have books, we have ledgers, it's all alphabetical and by date. I'm like, really? So I fire off the names and the dates, they call me right back. Yeah, we have them. I'm like, wonderful. So I head over. And as I'm looking up them, and they're there, their burial records saying they're buried in Calvary, I'm seeing every other page is another infant, and another infant, and another infant. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm scribbling down the names, and I go back to the office. We don't have them either. So now this is a quest. I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm here for. So I get all my information together. I find all of the detail for these 14 families. And part of the dedication of the Common Ground section in Blossom Hill was also a dedication for the baby section in Concord Calvary, and there's also a Common Ground section at Concord Calvary. So just to give you an idea, and I'm going to pass these around so that you can see them, this is what the funeral register looked like at Waters. And these are 3 different examples. As you will see on here, and I can look and see because I've seen so many of them, but it'll say lot and grave number, single, cemetery, Calvary, section, 4th row. So what I have done with help of volunteers is I have gone through Waters Funeral Home books. First I would go over there because you don't want to leave the funeral home with their original ledgers from the 1800s. And their records start in 1889. So I would be over there and I'd write it all down, and then I'd come back and I'd put in a spreadsheet, and then as we got to know each other more and they knew what I was doing, I would sign the books out like a library, and I would bring them back to the office in my spare time. But there isn't a lot of spare time when you run 13 cemeteries and you have this much going on, but I wanted to do this so badly. So thank goodness I have 2 wonderful volunteers. They're both here tonight. And they're going through page by page, and they are making copies of the funeral registers, and the other volunteer is data entering all of them. So I'm going to pass these around, and just feel free to take a look. So the records will say row 1, grave 1. You'll go to the next page, row 1, grave 2. You'll go 2 more pages, row 1, grave 3. And they just go 1 through 20 or 30, and then you'll see row 2. Now, I know I can create every row, but I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're 1 through 20, 1 through 20. Do they go this way? That's the part I don't know, because it looks very different over there. And when I'm looking at the area over there, it's not nearly big enough for the amount of people and babies that I have found. So now I will tell you the amount of people and babies that I have found. I have, to date, we have gone through the Waters Funeral Home books, and now I can say we, because we have, with my help, from October of 1889 through April of 1916. Now that's not a lot of time, but that's quite a bit of time. Now, mind you, we have thousands and thousands of people buried in our cemeteries that we have records for. Thousands, tens of thousands. We have come across 1,250 adults and babies that are buried just in Calvary, just in that section so far. And I'm only up to 1916. So my quest, don't get me wrong, if I had a horrible illness and I was going to pass away soon, I would be pretty upset. But then I would sit down and go, what can I do to get this done before I go? And I truly mean that. This is so important to me that we have this recorded, and we have everyone that's out there recorded on an interment card. We may not know exactly where they are, but we certainly will remember them. We will know them. Their names will be written. They deserve that, at the very, very least. So from 1916 right through to when really the records were kept properly, we will continue on our quest and get all of this done. And I can't say it enough. My volunteers have been a godsend. It still will be sitting there waiting for me, and I'd be itching to do it, but I know that I wouldn't have the time. As far as the infants go, again, when we had our Common Ground service back in 2011, we also remembered the babies. The babies, I mean, they had a mother, and you know, the little breath that they took means something. So I'll back up a little bit to when I first started working for the cemetery department. I never thought I would be working for the cemetery. I didn't know there was a job, and it's not like I wasn't going to work there. I never gave it a single thought in my ever. And you know, at 40 years old, I'm asked, do I want to do this? And I'm thinking, is there a job for that? You know, I had no idea. I had worked for the city for 5 years before I had got offered the job. So when I got there, I'm a very curious, hands-on person. I had to look at everything. I was, the groundsmen that I have, I can't say enough about them. They're all wonderful. They do whatever I ask. They're nothing silly, nothing. They don't roll their eyes in front of me. So I said, I don't want to see it all. I said, what does the shop area look like? So up we went, and I go, what's up there? They'd bring the ladder over, and I'd climb up, and I'd search, and I found things, and what's that doing there? Get that out of there. Because I wanted to know what everything was. So we went to the chapel. I loved the chapel. I said, oh my gosh. And they said, well, there's a basement. You probably don't want to go down there. Well, yeah, I do. So down we go, and it's a skinny little stairway, and down we went. And I come around. It's got this big barreled wood stove furnace. There's bats down there. There's spiders down there. But hey, the bats can eat. They got the spiders. So I went around, and underneath the stairs come down, and underneath I'm looking. I said, what is that? And they said, well, I don't know. It's been there since I've been here, and my men have been there 30 plus years. And I said, so I get down, and I'm looking in there, and it's a monument, and it's a sleeping baby. It's a white marble sleeping baby monument. And I'm like, get that out of there. And they go, it weighs like 400 pounds. I go, I don't care. Get that out of there. So they pull it out. And mind you, the staircase is about this wide, and two of them, struggling, they get it up. What do you want us to do with it? I don't know, bring it to my office. I'm thinking, that's not going to be down underneath the stairs. It's a baby. So then this project all came to light. All of these babies that weren't recorded, it all came together, and I said, you know what? We've got to put this baby over at the baby section. So with the help of Star Granite, they had a white marble base made. They adhered the baby to the base, and now that is our baby section. That is for all babies. It's for babies that people have lost a week ago. That's babies who were died in 1855. So each year, right around October 15th, we have National Infant Loss. And we invite anyone that I have come in contact with that might have lost a baby recently. We also invite every one of those 14 families. We invite the public. We invite anyone who has had any kind of infant loss. And you would be amazed at the people you talk to every day go, yeah, I lost a baby, back, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. People don't talk about it. But they come, and we've been doing it this will be our 6th year in October. So we go to the baby monument, and we set up a tent, and we set up a service, and we remember, and we have always a small wooden box for people to write little notes to their babies, or to a baby, or all babies. And we bury the box, and the first year that we did this, we all planted daffodil bulbs, much to the squirrels' liking. So the daffodils did not come up. So we're looking for another thing that we can do. If you ever go up to the baby section in Concord Calvary, the prison is here. It's right along the wall here. People bring in angel statues, and they're sitting all along the wall. There's baby statues everywhere in honor of all those infants. So if there's anything that anyone that I've mentioned that they would be interested in helping out with, coming to the chapel, anything like that, like I said, I have our Adopt a Grave program. I have our schedule for the services in the chapel. I also have my business cards here. That's why we can't just have anyone in here doing it. There's a real process to do it to make it last another 200 years. But then to Bo, and then to the Herbert family, she lived with them as a family member until she got older. She grew up with the children. She took care of the family. And when she was 14 or 15 years old, maybe even 16, the slaves were freed, and she got the word. Someone ran in, and she was at the sink doing dishes, and they said, "Oh my God, they freed the slaves, you're free." And she burst into tears, and she said, "What will become of me? I have no home. Where will I go?" She didn't know who her family was, anything. She was devastated. And the family kept her and said, "No, you will live here with us." And when that generation died off, she was with the next generation, and she lived out her life, she got a bit of an education. I can't remember exactly what the education was, but she got a bit of an education. She was well known to the family, and it was really rare to have a slave or a black person buried in a family lot, and she is within the family lot. But I will say, the family lot is here, and there are corner posts. She's just outside the corner post. So. That's how they were. Yeah.
Because a lot of times if you see it like that, they've been adjusted.
Right. Nope. This is the way. And as you can see, there are a lot of broken stones in the entire cemetery. We have just been approved for budget to fix stones in Old North Cemetery. We can hire 2 people who we're gonna train them. We've been professionally trained to write stones and fix stones. And every summer for a 4-month period, as many years as it takes us, we're going to start at one point. We're going to fix all the leaning stone first. People go, "Boy, the broken one should be fixed," but a leaning one will break. The broken ones are broken. They're not going to hopefully get any more broken. So our first priority is the leaning stones. So we'll be
Everybody asks me why cemeteries. And I'm sure, go ahead, somebody's going to ask it tonight too. And why is this not moving? There we go. Well, I have 2 answers. One is the tradition of going to visit your family's graves on Memorial Day. I started wandering and going, I wonder who these people are. The other answer, why not? There's history there, there's stories, there's plenty of fun stuff. Blossom Hill was one of my favorites to visit. I'm so going back there because we didn't get that much. So, we are going to start off discussing Allenstown. This takes the whole Merrimack Valley. My book covers the Merrimack Valley. So we're going to start off with Allenstown, which is St. John the Baptist Cemetery. And one of the most popular stories from, whoops, that's not it. There we go. Okay, one of the most popular stories is this one. Do you know who we are? Can you help us? Please help these people. They don't even know who they are. You might have heard this story in the news. This sad mystery of the bodies of a young woman and a female child found washed up in a barrel on Bear Brook State Park in 1985. In the year 2000, 2 more bodies of children mysteriously were also washed up on Bear Brook State Park in a barrel, and DNA recently said that they also belong to the woman who was originally found. The murder happened between 1977 and 1985, and it is still very, very open. Nobody knows who this person is, or who these people are, actually. Also, in Allenstown Cemetery is this man who was free from mental illness. Lorne is laid to rest in Allenstown Cemetery, and Lorne battled a mental illness known as schizophrenia for years and ran away. His family feared the worst and purchased this plot in 2001. Skeletal remains were discovered by a passerby underneath the highway in 2006, and diagnostic tests confirmed that they were Lorne's. From Allenstown, we move on to Auburn, and we find tragedy in Auburn, too. The first we meet is 15-year-old Ian, who lived, slept, and breathed hockey. While playing hockey, he met his friend Scott. They both played on a hockey team. During a championship game, a hockey puck struck Ian in the chest, causing him to go into cardiac arrest. Despite attempts to save his life, Ian died. Ironically, his teammate Scott also suffered a deadly injury in a different hockey game. He suffered a skull fracture. So, in a weird kind of way, the sport that brought these families together bring them comfort. Next, we have 5.5-year-old Stacy Messina. Stacy is also buried here, and Stacy disappeared without a trace. And when she finally returned, she was lifeless. She was murdered by strangulation in 1976. Her killer is serving a life sentence. Now we move on to Bedford, a little bit closer to where I'm from, but still with its tragedy. In Bedford's town cemetery, known as the Bedford Center Cemetery, or the locals simply call it Center Cemetery, we meet Jennifer. Jennifer was a 25-year-old mother of two that worked as a bus driver for Goffstown and as a dietary aide, until the silent killer took her. In this case, the silent killer is ovarian cancer, specifically ovarian small cell carcinoma. Lying on the ground next to her gorgeous stone is a love letter written by her husband, which is etched into a stone. Some little humor to, too much sadness in those few slides. We had to put some humor in. This is actually in a real sign in Merrimack's Last Rest Cemetery. Apparently, once you're in, you're in. Now we're going to move on to baseball. How many people in here, by a show of hands, are baseball fans? Cool. This is St. Joseph's Cemetery, where my father is buried. This, like most Catholic cemeteries, is split into two sections. The older section is actually on Manchester's end of Donald Street, while the newer and still used side is in Bedford. This generally flat ground cemetery has a few famous people buried within its gates. And this one is John Phenomenal Smith. Phenomenal was his baseball nickname. I didn't create it. And he played on a variety of teams in the 18 and early 1900s. I suspect none of you are baseball fans from that far back. Otherwise, I don't think you'd be sitting here. He played on the Philadelphia Athletics, the Pittsburgh Alleghenies, the Brooklyn Grays, the Detroit Wolverines, and the Philadelphia Phillies. And I don't even think some of these teams exist anymore, before retiring from baseball in 1904. Once retired, he joined another rank of service. He was a Manchester police officer until he retired in 1932. There are also a lot of religious orders buried throughout Bedford, St. Joseph's Cemetery in Bedford. There are 3 religious orders of nuns, as well as priests and bishops. But we're going to focus in on the nuns because the priests and bishops are everywhere. At least the nuns all stay in one corner. So first, we have the Sisters of the Precious Blood. The Sisters of the Precious Blood are the only cloistered order in the state. A cloistered order is an order that only interacts with society when absolutely necessary, which doctor's appointments, going grocery shopping, stuff like that. Or if their assigned ministry requires them to talk to people, such as if they answer the prayer line or if they run the gift shop. The cloistered nuns take a fourth vow of silence. So you have your normal vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and then cloistered orders take the vow of sacred silence, an order I would not be good in because I can't shut up. Okay, so how many of you in here were not raised Catholic, but went to Catholic school? So some of you may know this order, the Sisters of Mercy. That was one of the Yeah, the Sisters of Mercy is an apostolic or socially active order whose main charism is teaching, and they also care for the sick and elderly. Some of you may have been taught by the Sisters of Mercy, and judging from Liz's little, oh yeah, I'm assuming she was. There's also this little order, which I'm not even going to say the name because they picked a name that I can't even pronounce, but they are a very small Benedictine order of nuns who established a small convent on Bedford's Wallace Road when they escaped exile in Lithuania. Interesting shape for a monument, right? Kind of interesting. Anybody know what this is? Well, never mind. It's up there. Yeah, this is the Sheridan Guards Monument, and the Sheridan Guards are a group of local veterans that fought in the Civil War, and in 1910 donated the monument to the cemetery in memory of those that were lost, similar to kind of what you're doing. A Boy Scout from St. Raphael's Parish is currently raising money to build a brick memorial walkway in front of the monument. Next on St. Joseph's, we're going to get a little personal. This is a teacher that I had the pleasure of having. A very special teacher that I had the honor of having during my time at Gosler Park Elementary in Manchester. Any Gosler Park graduates here? I'd be surprised if there are. I didn't think so. This is Concord. Mary O'Leary was far more than just a teacher. She easily became a friend to any student that would let her into her life. She attended First Communions and birthday parties. She attended my birthday party and didn't just sit there, obligated to attend because she was invited. She chased my friends and I throughout the yard. She was fast for a teacher. Her life was cut short at the age of 45 on Super Bowl Sunday of 1998, and no, the Patriots were not playing. She suffered a heart attack. Her spirit kept me going while writing this book, especially during the times when I nearly gave up. And there were times when I gave up too, trust me. Next up, how many people have been to the New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery? I should expect to see more hands than before. Good. This is one of the biggest tourist attractions in New Hampshire amongst military supporters. The New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery, I have been to well over 100 cemeteries for this book. I'm not kidding. And I must say, this one had the biggest impact on me emotionally. There's only one other that had an emotional impact, and that's included as well. I had never been here, except once with my father when I was 3 or 4. And I don't remember what I had for breakfast. I can't remember back that far either. Now that I'm older, I appreciated the sacrifices much more and truly was moved by the experience of the memorial walkway. So those of you who have gone, did you do the memorial walkway? I can't do every single slide because we'd be here forever. But this is the stone that begins the memorial walkway, or maybe it ends. I don't exactly remember. But it's much bigger than that. And the mural in the back is many, many faces of soldiers that have served over time. And then there's a bronze helmet right on the stand. And that's the beginning or the end of the walkway. It's really beautiful. If you've never been, I highly suggest you go. Or if you have been, perhaps try to go again, and maybe you'll feel it a little bit more. This stone is very, very interesting. How many of you knew that Turtle Island was the original name for Boscawen? Darn it, there's one. Yes, Turtle Island was the original name of Boscawen, and this stone is erected in memory of those who fought for Turtle Island's independence. Then Then, of course, we have the chapel. Very non-denominational, as you can see by the first picture over towards Jill's side. Instead of saying left and right, I'm going to say Jill or me. It's much easier that way because I'm left-handed, some of you are right-handed. The left side is the altar, or the table will go, because altar is more for Catholics. But the place where the services are happening, there. And then the other side is a close-up of the window. Now, if you've never been to the chapel, it's probably because you weren't lucky enough to be there at the right times. It's not always open. They have many funerals throughout every single day of the week. So you need to get there at just the right time if you want to sneak in. Otherwise, they won't let you in, unless you ask. Next, we have Evans Cemetery in Bow, New Hampshire. Anybody from Bow? It's pretty close to here. Yes! Woo! Okay. So Evans Cemetery, considering Bow is really small, there's 3 cemeteries in Bow. That was pretty impressive. I was impressed, at least. So for the sake of the presentation, we will stick to Evans Cemetery, which is sometimes called Evans with an S. First on our stop is a young girl who lived life by her own terms, right up until her death from a rare form of cancer. Right from the very start, it was obvious to Taylor's adoptive parents that she would live life her way. In fact, the day she arrived on U.S. soil, her plane was the only plane allowed to land in Logan because of a blizzard. Go figure. Taylor, who loved playing with her brother in everything pink, I'm surprised her stone wasn't pink, was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer on September 11th of 2006 and died shortly after, in November of that same year. Next on the Bow tour, we are told to make a joyful noise. And this is an homage to longtime owner of the Bow Music Studio, Joanne Reed. Bow friend back there is shaking her head. Joanne loved all things music, and even passed music on to her daughter Karen, who I knew from playing many healing masses at Sacred Heart in Manchester, until she moved to Tennessee. Joanne's joyful noise was cut short due to a rare disease known as Lewy body disease. Anyone ever hear of it? All right, I'm just going to ignore you. Or LBD, which combines the symptoms of Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease together. While progression is usually slow, Joanne's was fast. Now we're headed to Candia. Anybody from Candia? I'm going to ask this as long as we're near Concord. Nobody, okay. Well, and this is a beautiful stone. It just says, to everything there is a season, you know the song. I'm not going to sing it because that'll break your ears. Anybody know what these are? Just by show of hands, so you don't have to answer the question. Okay, good. Ooh, the Bow person's got her hand up again. This is the town tomb. And this is at Holbrook Cemetery, the only real cemetery in Candia. The other one is pretty much, you can't get in it. Although this cemetery doesn't have unusual stories, we do find this very interesting little brick thing. This is known as the town tomb. Jill should know this. The town tomb you will find in most of your town cemeteries, or even your original city cemeteries. Valley Street has 2 of them. This is where the bodies of those who died during the winter months were kept until the ground was able to be dug. Of course, now they just pretty much sit there because technological advances have created machines that can now dig through the snow and the ice, and also they just keep them at the funeral home until it's able to be dug if it's really bad. Like that winter that we had a couple of years ago where the snow mountains were up to here. Yeah. So also interesting in this little town of Candia is the castle mystery. I'm not talking about the TV show either. This is the Mitchell stone. Nothing really exciting to the naked eye, right? I mean, you're probably saying, okay, cool, it's a stone, it says Mitchell. But according to the groundskeeper I interviewed the day I visited, somebody is placing the castles on random stones. Whoever it is remains a mystery, but the gesture is welcomed. Also a mystery in Candia is this beautiful angel. There is no name anywhere near the stone, but the groundskeeper, thank goodness for groundskeepers, says it does belong to somebody, and the flowers the angel is holding are changed to match the seasons. We close Candia with this interesting stone that has the actual signature of the state treasurer. Although his name is hard to read, it might be Flanders, I'm not sure. He served from 1964 to 1984. How many of you, by a show of hands, remember where you were on January 28th of 1986? Good. Some people remembered. When I did this in Candia, they were all like, it's like, now you probably know who we're talking about. This is Krista McCullough. I wasn't even close to being born yet. I was born in 1988. But I've always been a history nerd. So I knew once I started this book that this young woman needed to be a part of it, especially since I'm here in Concord. Kristen was excitedly awaiting the chance to be the first teacher in space. And I don't know about you, but I consider her the first teacher in space, even though she never made it there. Her memory lives on in many ways throughout the Concord community, from the middle school to the Science Learning Center. Now we're going to go into some familiar territory for Jill. Blossom Hill and Calvary. Well, Kristen McCullough is in Calvary too, but this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what one of your groundskeepers told me about this stone, is that this is known as Cross Alley. And this is the area officially that separates the town-owned Blossom Hill from the Diocese of Manchester-owned Catholic Calvary Cemetery. That's what I was told. It works. Go with it. And now we're going to move on to Old North, which, how many of you were taking part in the tour afterwards? Yeah, a lot of hands. Well, I'd hope so. The next cemetery in Concord takes us to Old North, where we find the 14th President of the United States, which is who? Oh, wait, Franklin Pierce. Although the president's life is portrayed by the media as one of power and leadership, Mr. Pierce battled a deeper demon: alcoholism. He turned his life over to the bottle after a difficult adult life, losing his wife to TB and all 3 of his sons before they reached adulthood. His first son died just 3 days after birth. Their second son died of typhus, and their third and final son, the only one to live past infancy, died at 11 years old in a tragic accident. The Pierce family homestead in Hillsborough is a popular tourist attraction, and Franklin Pierce College, with campuses around the state, carries his name. We're leaving Concord now, and we're going to Dumbarton. Anybody? Darn it. Okay, well, Dumbarton has 2 cemeteries. Go ahead, go really, because the most popular one is where these 2 are found, and this is Dumbarton Center Cemetery. On Jill's side, we have a small baby whose name was Ethan, and he was born with trisomy 18. Most people who are diagnosed with this live less than a year, and Ethan lived for 2 days. A few feet away is an interesting stone for the Fogg family, and apparently one of them was a science nerd because there's a chemical formula written on his stone. Right. It's not me. Next we have Stark Cemetery. This is the cemetery that Dumbarton people really don't even know exists unless they live in the area. I just lost my spot. Okay, here we go. The cemetery is so far off the road that many people just drive by thinking it's a big mansion where the house is way into the fields. No, it's a cemetery way into the fields. This is the Stark Cemetery, where members of the Stark family are buried, minus John Stark, who's buried in, which is in Manchester. Nice try. John Stark is not buried here. John Stark is buried at Stark Park in Manchester. You learned something new. My job is done. No. And as you can tell from the stone detail, this cemetery is very, very old. It's also very, very hard to get into. There's a big iron gate, and let me tell you, that gate is heavy. Thank God I had my ex there with me at that time. Now we're moving on to Goffstown. This is Holy Trinity Cemetery, which is a privately owned cemetery that is operated by the Holy Trinity Polish National Cathedral in Manchester. Try saying that 10 times fast, it's not easy. This one is very, very interesting because it simply says Daniel. Is Daniel his first name, his last name? Is Daniel a dog? We don't know. I mean, we could talk to that cemetery's cemetery clerk and find out, but we'll just leave it at a mystery. It's fun. This is the other cemetery that I talked about when I said it was the one that was very emotional for me. This is a very forgotten cemetery that is in Goffstown. It is located deep in the woods behind the Goffstown Women's Prison. This cemetery, which was rededicated in 2004, you could have told me because the grass needs to be cut, has a tragic story to it. There was an asylum where the Hillsborough County Nursing Home now stands, and it burnt down, and none of the residents were able to get out. They buried everyone together using their patient numbers to mark the graves. So literally, if you go to the cemetery, that is what you see. 1, 2, all the way up to 732, I believe is the last number. Kind of similar to your situation. Next, we're moving on to Hooksett, and this is Governor Head at, well, Head Cemetery in Hooksett. I guess when you're a governor, you can have a cemetery named after you. There's not much about him. He's a governor. Cool. Moving on. We have Holy Rosary Cemetery, which is a private cemetery owned by Holy Rosary Church in Hooksett. Many people assume that this stone is merely a decoration placed by the parish. You would think so too, right? I mean, it doesn't look like something that would be a person's. It is. It's somebody's stone. Someone is actually buried here, but they didn't want their name anywhere near the stone. They just wanted to be memorialized this way. Next, we're moving on to Hudson. This is Holy Cross Lithuanian Cemetery in Hudson, where we meet a very young boy who said his bedtime prayers and went to sleep, never to wake again. This is exactly what happened to 11-year-old Zach. Nobody knows what happened to this healthy and athletic child. Even the doctors are clueless and could find nothing that would hint at a cause of death. Zach was a student at Presentation of Mary Academy and played football. A memorial stadium is in the works for somewhere in Hudson in his honor. Oh, whoops, sorry. That was just a picture of the Lithuanian Cemetery. That's Zach's stone. And now we want to talk about Hudson's dedicated couple. The Bednars were very dedicated to the town of Hudson. Mr. Bednar served 14 years on the New Hampshire legislature, 12 years as a selectman, and 4 years as a counselor. He founded and fathered the Right to Know law. And his wife, Mrs. Bednar, served as a pediatric nurse for, wait for it, 57 years. Next, we're moving on to Londonderry. This is Yvonne, a young girl whose life was cut short by cancer. Before her death, she loved shopping, she loved going to church and spending time with her church people. But perhaps most important, she loved spending time with her boys at the Londonderry Fire Department. I suppose I can let her have Londonderry, I have Manchester. Also in Londonderry, we find a dedicated police sergeant. This is in Pleasant View Cemetery in Londonderry. We find Derry Police Sergeant Kelly, who served 10 years on the force. He died of respiratory failure due to exposure to lead and toxic fumes from the department's shooting range. Moving on to Manchester, We start with Pine Grove Cemetery. How many people know where Pine Grove is in Manchester? It's on Califf Road. It's very, very large. Hello, bow lady, you're waving your hand again. And it's a very beautiful and historic cemetery. Many politicians are buried here, and its gorgeous pond is a popular photography backdrop for proms, engagements, weddings, and senior photos. But the people I chose to highlight from this cemetery are not famous, but have stories to tell just the same, such as Eileen. Eileen is a young girl whose tragic death made the news in 2013. Eileen was being a typical teen and partying with her friends in New York City when she tried out the new drug known as Molly, which sent her into cardiac arrest and eventually killed her. This was also a pretty emotional story to cover. Next, we meet brothers Andreas and Giovanni. This poor family lost both of their sons to the same rare disease, known as Nemo. I'm not a nurse, so I'm not going to let you suffer through the whole entire name. The fact that they each had the same disease is very rare, but each case is different, as evident by their ages. Giovanni lived to the age of 6, while Andreas had the more progressive form and died at 7 months. A beautifully written yet heartbreaking story is written by their mother on the back of the stone, which is what that long piece of writing is on Jill's side. Thank goodness you're sitting there. I know your name. Mr. Fuller owns a furniture store in the area, and his wife, who passed away, enjoyed sewing and quilting. What struck me in my tracks with this amazing stone is the wording, "When life gave me scraps." It really puts things into perspective. What do you do with your scraps? Another thing that makes Pine Grove so popular is the many private mausoleums, which many young kids, me included when I was younger, think are houses. In a way, they kind of are. There are 11 of these spread throughout the cemetery, including this beautiful one for the Hill family. Now, how many of you are familiar with Manchester, specifically the West Side? Okay, well, you might know this small to medium-sized cemetery is located behind Sacred Heart Church in Manchester. Did you know that it has a name? My mother, when she read my book, thought it has a name. I thought it was just the cemetery behind Sacred Heart. No, it's called the Piscataqua Cemetery. And this small hidden cemetery has 2 famous people buried there. The first is New Hampshire educator Francis Wayland Parker, and his wife, who was also named Frances. The Parker Scholarship, coveted by many area seniors, is named after this great educator. Buried a few feet away is the founder of Labor Day. George McGuire is buried under a very simple Celtic cross in this small cemetery in Manchester. Imagine that. Next, we visit another historic cemetery in Manchester, the Valley Cemetery. How many of you know the Valley Cemetery? Although most people think of ghosts when the Valley Cemetery is mentioned, we will focus on the positives of the cemetery and which famous people are buried inside of it. First out, we have Moody Currier, who, in case the slide doesn't tell you, is the founder of the Currier Museum of Art. It's also now an art school. But before he founded that, he was also a governor of New Hampshire from 1885 to 1887. That was way back when the governor only served for 2 years. Oh wait, that's right. Thank you. I'm glad I'm on it. I'm not a politician, can you tell? Next we have Frederick Smith. Unfortunately, his beautiful mausoleum, isn't that gorgeous? Can't really tell because of the picture, but it's overlooking the valley of the cemetery. So underneath his beautiful mausoleum is the valley. It used to be a walkway that people would use to get from Manchester to the next town over before they filled it in. His mausoleum is one of the most popular spots for hauntings. I went there. I walked all the way up and took a picture of his stone. I didn't feel anything. The Candia Library is named after this former governor, who also founded the New Hampshire College of Agriculture and Mechanic Arts. Thank you. Also known today, thankfully, as UNH. Can you imagine saying that to somebody? Where'd you go to college? No. UNH is good. Now, how many of you here have heard of Elliott Hospital? There we go. Now we're good. Okay. Unlike most hospitals, Elliott Hospital's foundress was a female, known as Mary Elliott. And she's buried at Valley Street in a very simple stone, nothing extravagant, which is surprising. You would think their family would have had a more extravagant stone. But moving on, we start where it all began, Mount Calvary Cemetery in Manchester. The first person we will visit is the founder of the local McDonald's chain, and no, I'm not serving French fries. And he is buried in the mausoleum located across the street from the cemetery. It's kind of hard to miss. If you can't find him, just look for the big M. It's there. Now, this story honestly made me mad. Vacation. It's supposed to be fun, right? How many of you have gone on a vacation? It's fun. You had fun, right? Yeah. Aaron did not. Aaron was enjoying a yearly vacation with his buddies in St. Thomas when he fell sick. He did what was expected of him and went to the nearest medical facility, placing his life in the hands of doctors. Sadly, that doctor administered the wrong medication, which resulted in Aaron's cardiac arrest and death. There is a lawsuit pending, but due to the fact that it happened out of the country, I'd say there's a pretty high chance that nothing will ever be resolved. Also pretty sad is this tragedy from Manchester. Tricia Doyle and her two children, Jillian, who was 4 at the time, and James, who was 2 at the time, were both brutally murdered in Tricia's home by Tricia's brother. Their beautiful stone says, "Together forever." This is a friend of mine. Joey Therian was a devoted son, brother, and husband. But perhaps his most loved job was father to his daughter. Joey's life, which was nothing short of easy due to a diagnosis of Tourette's syndrome, ended in a car accident. I know these two, too. Ivan and Jean Burnett were dedicated not only to each other, but to their service in the church. Jean participated in a variety of ministries, while Ivan answered a special call. These French names are so hard. He answered a special call to train and coordinate the altar servers. He did this ministry faithfully for many years at St. Patrick's in Manchester, until its, in my opinion, unnecessary closure in 2007, and he continued after that closure to serve at St. Raphael's Parish in Manchester until his death in September of 2014. Almost a year later, exactly to the day, his wife June was reunited with the love of her life. Ending out this cemetery is the woman who truly started this whole thing in my soul. It was through my many trips to visit this young soul's grave that I began wandering the cemetery and wondering who these people were. This is my grandmother Beatrice, who died tragically at the age of 23 on February 3rd of 1953. She was having routine surgery when the knife slipped from the doctor's hand, slicing her liver. Doctors tried for days to save her, and lines were out of what was then Notre Dame Hospital, which is now Catholic Medical Center, for people trying to donate blood to keep her alive, but all attempts failed. I have no doubt she is my guardian angel and has probably banged her head against the wall a few times going, what the heck is she thinking? Now we're moving on to Merrimack. And in Merrimack, we find Matthew Thornton. Matthew Thornton, for all you history buffs, or maybe those who failed history, was one of the signers of our Declaration of Independence. And I'm pretty sure he's joining our founding fathers in shaking their heads at what our nation has become today, or what it's about to become. Because let's face it, the sad part about this is one of these people are going to win. This graveyard carries his name, the Thornton's Ferry Graveyard, and a neighboring graveyard called Turkey Hill both use the original town spelling of Merrimack, which was the way it's spelled on the slide. How many of you knew that? Moving on, we go to Milford and spend some time at the beautiful and scenic Riverside Cemetery. As you enter the cemetery, you are greeted with a section filled with gorgeous monuments, many of which are Italian families. One that especially caught my attention was this large monument with a lion on the top. As we all know, lions are a sign of strength, power, courage, exactly. But if you look closely, which I'm not sure if you can tell by the slide, but if you go in person, this lion is emaciated. You can see its bones through the skin. According to cemetery icon research, this most commonly sends a message of weakness or surrender. Buried deep in this cemetery, in the newer section, is eBay's first successful customer. Lynn loved antiquing very early in her life. Although she went to school to be a teacher, her love for antiquing captured her soul. She opened an antique store with her husband in Derry and later moved it to Epsom, where I believe it still stands today thanks to her daughter. Lynn specialized in authentic 16th century Victorian furniture, as well as antique baby items and dollhouses. When eBay was created, she was one of the first to open a storefront on their site and became one of their best sellers. Excuse me while the presenter takes a sip of water. Presenter is allergic to lilacs and lives in New Hampshire. And God has a sense of humor. And then I'm going to proceed to spill it all over myself. Great. At least you guys are getting a comedy show, 2 for 1. Also in Milford, at Milford's West Street Cemetery. Gee, I wonder what street it's on. Anywho, here, former Governor John McLean chooses his final resting place. Governor McLean served from 1905 to 1907 and was born in Scotland. He served 2 terms in the Senate from 1891 to 1895 and was also the man responsible for the creation of the White Mountain National Forest in Campton, New Hampshire, which also stretches into Maine. Next, we're moving on to Nashua. And we begin with Edgewood Cemetery. Edgewood is very similar in style to Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. How many of you have been to that cemetery? Yay! I'm not surprised with you. Hidden deep within the newer section of this cemetery, we come upon a true war hero. Raban didn't die overseas, but suffered from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. He served in Iraq and in 2005 survived a gunshot wound to the head, which earned him one of the highest military honors, the Purple Heart. He defied the odds stacked against him, but unfortunately, PTSD was a demon he could not defeat. Also in Nashua, we have the cemetery of St. Francis Xavier and St. Stanislaus. On the top of the hill, as you enter this cemetery, you come to this beautiful monument, which offers benches to sit and reflect. My friend and I started and ended our visit to this cemetery by visiting this particular place. This beautiful monument was paid for by the parishioners of St. Francis Church in honor of all the unborn that did not survive. This kind of a stone is common in Catholic cemeteries, but most of them only talk about those lost to abortion. This parish and cemetery went the extra mile, as did Calvary Blossom Hill, and created this beautiful monument not only for those who died to abortion, but also those flowers that simply didn't bloom and were lost through miscarriage, stillbirth, and early infant death. Also in this cemetery is Tony Gold, a typical teenager who had big dreams for his future. He wanted to be a New Hampshire Fish and Game warden. He volunteered at local camping sites and loved to ride his bike. One day, that hobby of riding his bike was what killed him, when he was killed by a drunk driver who was so drunk that his car went from the road to his driveway and proceeded to run Tony over. The broken dreams of this child and countless others should remind us that no drink, drug, or text should ever be important enough to do behind the wheel. Our last town that we will talk about is where? And no, seriously, where? First off, we come to Hillside Cemetery is where we will zone in on for where, although they have many interesting cemeteries, including the Quaker cemeteries. First, we come to Otto. Otto was born under another name, but changed it in an attempt to save his life during the Holocaust, and it worked. After the war, he became interested in art and sculpting. He started taking classes and actually married his instructor. He became so talented that he has works of art in both the Courier in Manchester and the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Perhaps what's most impressive, however, is that he sculpted his own urn, which he is buried in. Go figure that. Now, those of you who remember classic TV may notice the reason I chose this slide title. And there's a story that goes behind this. This is a very impressive group of ladies, perhaps the Golden Girls of Ware. Betty Hughes is the only of these three that have passed away. But her two friends, Miss Hennessy and Miss Ashley, will join her later as they decided to be buried together. This brings a whole new meaning to Friends Forever. This was just a sample of the many interesting stories I've found traveling through the Merrimack Valley. The rest are found in the book, which, if you haven't purchased one already, I'm sure you're wondering where you can get one. Since I'm a college student who has yet to discover where the so-called money tree exists, if anybody has a clue, you could fill me in. I don't have any for sale with me today, but they are available for purchase online at lulu.com, Amazon, and barnesandnobles.com. And you can also have any Barnes & Nobles associate help you order one right there at the counter. For those of you with bad memory, don't worry, I have cards in the back that you can take home with you. If you'd like one, please stop by or see me on our way out for the cemetery tour. If you represent a library or a school or a club or a church of some kind and would like me to present for your next event, I'll be available afterwards to talk and exchange contact information as well. I love doing this. This is so fun. You have been a great audience to present for, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Does